Good morning from Sydney, Australia, everyone. I know we're in the opposite time zone, but it's great to see everyone. This morning's session is brought to you by Professor Gary Velan and me, Professor Patsy Polly, and we're from the University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. And Gary is the Senior Vice Dean for the Faculty of Medicine and Health. And Gary led the development of My Education portfolio. So I won't tell you too much about the whole My Education portfolio journey at this point, because Gary will tell us about that. But it's been a very productive and insightful time for us at the university, and we've had the opportunity to work together with colleagues to develop this, this work. So over to you, Gary.
Thanks very much, Patsy. I'll just share a PowerPoint. I hope everyone can now see that. So for those of you who don't know Patsy, Patsy is a professor in the Department of Pathology in the School of Medical Sciences in UNSW Medicine and Health. And she's an education-focused academic and co-director of the UNSW Scientia Education Academy, and has a long-standing interest in e-portfolios. So in today's session, we'll talk about My Education Portfolio, which is a platform designed to recognise and reward teaching excellence in higher education. I'll set the scene with a little bit of background about My Education Portfolio, and then Patsy will lead participants through some activities relating to your professional identity development, and then we'll come back and feedback, and we'll do a brief survey at the end. So firstly, a little bit about My Education Portfolio. This was developed as a project of the UNSW Scientia Education Academy, and the original Academy members are listed here. We were funded by UNSW to perform this project, and had an external project advisory group which included education experts from Australia and internationally. So why did we set out to develop such a portfolio? It's because research has traditionally been recognised and rewarded more than teaching at leading universities such as UNSW. And possibly one of the major reasons for this is that measures of research excellence, although not universally accepted, are widely used and accepted. For example, the H-index. There are no such generally accepted measures of teaching excellence. So in building this portfolio, we aimed to piggyback on existing literature and evaluation frameworks to develop measures by which teachers at UNSW could be recognised and rewarded for their excellence. So we conducted an international two-stage Delphi study in order to define the dimensions of effective teaching in higher education. In stage one, we sent out a survey to a number of people and asked them to imagine a highly effective teacher in higher education, which could be real or ideal, and to list the dimensions of that teacher's effective practice. So 65 respondents identified 13 dimensions of effective teaching practice in the first round. And then in the second round, we went back to those respondents, and fortunately 58 continued in the second round, and they ranked the dimensions that were identified in the first round on a scale from not important to extremely important, as well as ordering the dimensions by order of priority. And at the end of that second round, we were able to come to 4 consensus dimensions of effective teaching. each of which was underpinned by 4 criteria. So these are the 4 dimensions which we landed on: teaching and supporting student learning, design and development of learning activities and assessment, disciplinary expertise and professional development, and educational leadership. And as I mentioned, each of these were underpinned by 4 criteria, and we operationalized these in an e-portfolio which enables staff to demonstrate their achievements in education, not just to demonstrate, but to curate and reflect on their achievements. So we then mapped these dimensions against existing frameworks, including the UK Higher Education Academy, now Advanced HE, their professional standards framework, our own UNSW academic expectations framework, and the Australian University Teaching Criteria and Standards developed previously by Denise Chalmers. And we found that although there was not 100% alignment, there was reasonably good agreement between the My Education portfolio dimensions and pre-existing frameworks. So we wanted staff at UNSW to think about their impact as teachers and their progression as professional educators over time, and to think about their sphere of influence. So at the in early career teachers, their level of influence will predominantly be for students. As they progress, they'll have more influence on their colleagues, as well as their students, and then they'll move on to have an impact on the institutional educational environment, and perhaps through scholarship of teaching and learning on educational knowledge. And they may then have a broad impact on the national global education community. And this framework was used to underpin support mechanisms for teachers to think about the sorts of evidence that they may include in their portfolio. And we adapted this from Ruth Graham's work for the Royal Academy of Engineering. So we developed My Education portfolio with assistance from a group of IT developers at UNSW because there were no existing portfolio software that was quite able to perform what we required. So once developed, we included resources for staff on how to collect evidence related to those spheres of influence. We provided a guide to indicative standards of practice that would be appropriate at each level of academic promotion in relation to each of the 4 dimensions. And we also provided exemplar profiles so that teachers could see themselves and where they may progress to. And as I mentioned before, the portfolio is aligned with our UNSW academic expectations framework. So we've incorporated My Education portfolio into the UNSW promotion processes, particularly for the education case for promotion. It can also be used in career development. In the Faculty of Medicine and Health, we use it for teaching awards as well. So these are the criteria that underpin the first dimension, teaching and supporting learning. And when teachers add evidence to their portfolio, they can tag evidence with 1 or more criteria from 1 or more dimensions. So these are the 4 criteria related to teaching and supporting student learning. And these are the criteria underpinning design and development of learning activities and assessment. These are the criteria for disciplinary expertise and professional development. And these are the criteria for educational leadership. So this is an example of a profile by somebody who looks a bit younger than I do. So when somebody creates their profile in My Education Portfolio, they automatically have their name and job title included and their email address. They can link their social media links, and they put in a brief 50-word bio and their photo. And then they need to include some text on their teaching context and philosophy. Once they've done that, they've created their profile, and then they can then add evidence related to one or more of the dimensions of the portfolio. Now, once an academic has added evidence, they're not expected to add evidence against each criterion in each dimension, but typically, when developing a case for promotion, one would have some evidence in each of these dimensions. So once they've done that, we added a tool called My Cases within the portfolio, which enables teachers to build, preview, and export an education case for promotion, teaching awards, or fellowships. And we've created a how-to video for staff to get them started with that. So in the exemplar profiles on the website, we have examples, gender-neutral examples of staff at various academic promotion levels. And these are meant to be examples of what somebody who is outstanding at that particular level might have in their portfolio, to give people inspiration and ideas as to what sort of evidence they might collect in order to reach that level with showing outstanding teaching performance. So that's the background of My Education Portfolio. I'll hand you over now to Patsy to talk you through the next part of the session.
Thank you, Gary. Colleagues, as you can see, the portfolio dimensions have got a lot of rich criteria within those dimensions that helps us as individuals to try and dedicate areas of our profile against those dimensions and those areas. So this part of our presentation or workshop comes back to us and asking the question of who am I? And I tend to ask this question quite a lot when I'm forming a case for, say, promotion, or when I'm going up for a job, or when I'm applying for a grant or award. So the portfolio is very important in providing the scaffold for building these profiles. Okay, so as part of this point of the workshop, I'd like you to think about your own profile. The idea of this point is to support you in building your profile via your own portfolio or CV, to benchmark your achievements in teaching, to link your profile and professional identity in higher education to those benchmarks or criteria. So at the completion of the next, let's call it 20 minutes, we will have an idea of who we are. So if the participants can think about their digital identity using the persona framework with associated criteria in the My Education Portfolio dimensions as part of the process of working through this workshop, it would be fabulous. So let's get started. I'm not sure if I can actually progress this particular slide. Am I able to? No. So folks, if we can get you to access your CVs or portfolios, CVs are usually easier to find for some people, just to get an idea of how to start to dedicate some of the criteria you have in your CV against those dimensions. So the idea is to either work together or as individual.
Patsy, what I might do is show the
Yes,
show the dimensions.
that would be fantastic. So how does everyone feel about that? Just to get us started, and we can workshop a bit about where you may be having some thoughts or issues trying to dedicate some of your achievements back to some of the dimensions. I know with colleagues that we've worked with at the University of New South Wales, people often ask, does this activity go in a dimension X versus dimension Y? Please give me some feedback on that. So we're here to basically talk you through some of the dimensions if you need that. So is everyone okay? I think we've got a small enough group that we can basically work with one group rather than having multiple breakout groups. Helen, is that acceptable?
Sure. So you just want to keep everyone in the main room then?
I think so. We've
Okay.
got 7 participants, and I think 3 of those are us.
Okay, that sounds fine.
So we've got about, let's give ourselves about 15 to 20 minutes to think about that. And again, you can ask both Gary, myself, any questions you may want clarified as part of working through your CV or e-portfolio.
So Patsy, this session is going to end around 3:50. So is that yeah, okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Okay.
Because if we dedicate about 15 minutes to this, then we have a little bit of a brainstorm at the end, and then wrap up with a 5-minute, I guess, overview and survey. So folks, if you have any questions, please, turn your mics on or write something in the chat, and Gary and I will support you or feedback or chat.
Maybe it might help if we ask our participants to talk about their own experience and whether such an e-portfolio might be of use in their professional practice.
That's a great starting point, Gary. So colleagues, if anyone's got any comments or anything to add or respond to in light of that concept, do you think a higher education, my education portfolio would be useful?
So I had a quick question for clarification. So the idea is that the My Education portfolio is something that would help support the individual while applying for promotion or tenure, or it's something that even like an early career professional would begin to build over time. And it would be associated. So it's associated with the University of New South Wales. Do components of it then, so it's sort of like it's an aggregator, like in terms of your CV and things like that, or other profiles you might have. I'm just trying to understand, like, what does this sort of what is the value of this particular profile, particularly in their career at University of New South Wales, and then perhaps outside as well?
Gary, would you like to take that?
Thanks, Helen. So the portfolio is intended to focus teaching staff on those areas that are most valued, and also to inculcate the idea of continual reflection and improvement. So they include evidence, and that may change over time. And at some stage, they may curate that evidence and showcase it for a particular purpose. So what I didn't mention earlier is that staff can have their profile private to them if they so wish. The default is that it's shared among the community at UNSW, but also it's possible to share one's profile freely on the web. So that enables a more global view of one's profile, and that could lead to collaborations and interactions with educators across the world.
I might just also add to that. So Gary mentioned in his 15-minute overview and presentation that research metrics are pretty easy in terms of they're quantifiable, they're apparent, they're universal across contexts and universities. So the dimensions here are also achieving that concept where they become universal, not only for the University of New South Wales, but across the higher education context. So, for example, if we're looking at this first one, teaching and supporting student learning, that happens in any context, you know, whether it be secondary or tertiary education, actually. So these dimensions are mapped against several criteria in our own education expectations framework for promotion, but they are applicable across contexts. Okay? And that's what makes them somehow very portable and very useful across the sector, because people can start to see where they sit and what they have achieved and what they do, and that how that aligns to their portfolio and their profile. Because it's easy for me to pull up an H-index, but it's very hard for me to quantify educational leadership. Because these metrics are often qualitative. So they become somehow, let's face it, easier for panels to understand, easier for other colleagues to interpret when you're going up for a job or an award or something like that.
I mean, it strikes me sort of as a way to, you know, put in some kind of criteria for, you know, what we might call the professional interpersonal skills in some respects, you know, whether it's the soft skills or that really are the hard skills to teach and things like that. You know, in talking with a associate professor at Washington University, St. Louis, who was a postdoc at Stanford, the idea that, you know, as academics, we have multiple profiles now, like whether it's your ORC ID, you know, or it's, you know, being in some sort of database for the number of grants you've received, these other kinds of aggregators, you know, that track, you know, what, you know, your grant activity or your funding activity, or, you know, or even like what kind of reviews you've written for journals and things like that. You know, what is the, you know, how does this where does this profile fit within sort of that broader ecosystem where, you know, faculty, especially research faculty, have so many dimensions and profiles that are sort of out there in that ecosystem.
Exactly that, Helen. So those criteria and those dimensions that you've mentioned are very easy to look at for research. So when we have a dimension set like this, it becomes easier for us to understand what we do in the education space. And there are aspects of this that feed into that research area, for example, SOTL and higher education research. And they're more quantifiable, like how many grants did I get in the last 5 years and how many publications and presentations and so on. But the actual learning activity and the student experience work is hard to quantify unless you're coming in with student surveys. But what other things are we using to fortify our profiles in teaching? So yes, there's a scholarly component that is doable in the education sphere. And that meets up with the research dimension that you mentioned. And that's pretty easy to do. However, all the other items that are implicit, the things that we do that we don't bring to the surface, like the soft skills that you're talking about in education, performance and delivery are here. So Gary and team have unearthed all of these implicit attributes.
I guess the other thing to say is that the portfolio helps to make teaching a more public activity, and rather than a private and hidden activity as it might have been viewed previously. So it's easy for an academic now to share their practice. And in fact, if one is logged into My Education Portfolio, you can search by criterion and see all the profiles that have evidence against the criterion. You may it may be inspired, or you may want to adapt or adopt the practices that have been shared. So it's a way of sharing good practice across the institution and beyond.
And I must say, COVID has highlighted a lot of the practices now, because things are more available online as well. And you're seeing a lot more educators get onto social media as well as a forum for, showing their practice. But this is, to me, still a little bit informal, even though it's out there.
Right.
It is a bit of an aggregator in terms of the formal activities.
And then, has there been any interest or adoption from other institutions?
Gary. Mike.
Sorry. We have had some interest from other institutions. Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand has expressed some interest. The platform is built. I guess it would need to be slightly adapted to each institution's needs, but the basic framework is there. In fact, one of our educational leaders at UNSW has utilised the shell of the platform for a student-facing portfolio as well.
Oh, wow. Well, it's very exciting. I mean, just to see, taking a first pass at trying to kind of define what these are, how would you describe them, and in a way that's universal, and really kind of making this work more visible, and also in a way that people can kind of then really use this as a kind of reflective prompt to kind of think about a filter, if you will, to describe their own experiences.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's really built up on a scholarly approach to this innovation, and also the idea of using several types of frameworks to build up this framework. So giving it a very deep sort of way of building criteria. So we're at about 8:30 on my clock anyway, Sydney time. So that's about halfway through this session. Has anyone got any comments? Because we've been chatting a lot. Comments, questions?
It'd be great to hear from any of our participants as to what they do to document their teaching practice, and whether any of the aspects of My Education Portfolios would seem useful to them.
Hi there.
Hello, Kate.
I'll chime in. My name is Kate. I'm an instructional designer, so I'm not an instructor. But one of the things that I'm looking at coming up is helping our faculty to document their own professional journey, right? And finding different ways to engage them in this process of creating their own e-portfolios. That being said, I'm at a very small private liberal arts college where the faculty prize academic autonomy above all else. So any kind of standardization is viewed as sort of the top-down, sort of oppressive, right? Like, you know, and it's a tough culture egg to crack. So I think that one of the things that I'm really drawn to here is because there is such a culture of no standardization, just even having a little bit of a rubric for faculty to benchmark themselves against, there are faculty who want that, even if the overwhelming, you know, kind of majority is saying like, no, we don't want any of this, right? So providing them with some kind of a rubric to start from, I think is a great place to start. So I'm really happy to see that. Thank you. I think that will be particularly useful for me. One of the things that drew me to this session as well was your use of the word excellence, because we do have a number of teaching awards at the institution, and this made me realize there are really no criteria for those teaching awards. They go by student nomination and kind of what the committee sees, and so having kind of criteria sort of kicking around that maybe we can even just sort of slowly sort of suffuse into the conversation, I think will be really useful for elevating teaching, right, to the kind of important place that it really should be in the academy. So I'm very thankful for your matrix. It looks really great, and for those pieces.
Thanks very much for that, Kate. I wish you all the best with your journey. As we all know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, but I think one salutary lesson that I might share that I learned along the way, when we first started on this journey, I was trying to come up with a way in which we could measure education in a way that research has been measured. And then I looked at the literature going back 80 years, and I found that there'd been many attempts at doing this, and they'd all failed miserably. And perhaps they, not only had they failed, they were probably morally not appropriate. So we changed tack and aimed to develop a more holistic view of an educator's practice, and something that an educator could build on over time and develop a more rounded view of themselves rather than just student evaluations, for example.
It's a very fair point, Gary, and there are so many other dimensions and elements that can build into one's profile besides the student evaluations, and it often is a little bit worrisome, I think, if applications are going to committee and if I see a good one, I promote it without a set of criteria to work with. It helps the committees too, by the way. So yeah, not only the people going up, but the committees, and it's a more of a transparent process in the end. So yeah, thank you for your comments, Kate. They are issues that we've also faced at our place. Kim's got something in the chat. Kim states that an e-portfolio would be much better for what we use for promotion and tenure process to demonstrate excellence in teaching. So yes, it's that whole, as Kate raised, the whole excellence piece that needs to be highlighted as part of one's profile. So Kim, do you have any other comments to add?
No, it's been a long day and most of my brain is pretty much gone at this point.
Fair enough. We're just starting, so we're fresh.
Yeah, but Kate, I think, sorry, Kim, I think that's a good point you've made. One of the things that has slightly held us back is that promotion panels want easy ways to determine excellence. They want metrics because it's a lot easier for them. So how do we manage this in a non-metricized environment such as an e-portfolio? And I think one of the things that we're working on implementing in the portfolio is the ability for other staff to endorse pieces of evidence, to give award panels and promotion panels confidence that this practice is effective and endorsed by other teachers at UNSW. Gracie, you've got your hand up.
Yes. I just want to share how we use ePortfolio from the faculty and staff side at Tarrant County College in Fort Worth, Texas. And so we're currently using Folio in Canvas. And so we actually use it for faculty. I think it was Kate or Kim that talked about using ePortfolios from a faculty perspective for promotion and tenure to document evidence of achievement. They can also use it to include any research and publications that they have, and any presentations that they do, professional teaching for anything they do on the campus across the district or any conferences they participate in. They can also capture that via their ePortfolio. In addition, we have some different projects across the district where we have faculty that are being facilitators for some of the training that we're doing. And they can also include those things in their ePortfolio along with what they do from the teaching and learning side in the classroom. So that's how we use it for faculty, and staff can use it the same way. And the way we train faculty train students to roll out their ePortfolio with the same content of items that faculty use where appropriate, because students may not have publications, but they can use capstone projects or things like that that are tied and aligned to our assessment initiative, and they can capture that in their ePortfolio. So we use a one template design across the institution. So whether it's faculty, staff, or students using ePortfolio, the format is the same. The content may vary based on the particular end user, but the framework is the same.
Can I ask Gracie a question?
Thanks very much, Gracie. Sorry, Kate.
Can I ask Gracie a question after that?
Sure.
That was phenomenal. Sure. Gracie, I'm totally enamored with the thought that you use this for staff as well, for staff development as well. You mentioned that. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because that's the first I've heard of it.
Yes, so we rolled out ePortfolio initiative last summer with the faculty cohort. And so we've aligned ePortfolio to our assessment initiative to collect evidence of student learning across the academic and co-curricular space. So for the staff, just let's say for student affairs, even if it's career services, we take them through the same process by which they would collect evidence of students. So if I have students that we have students that go to attend career services, and they are going and developing their resume. They can, the staff side, they'll still lay out their ePortfolio with the general content, their overview, their educational experience, all of those things. But when it comes to us collecting evidence of the student artifacts, each person has their own ePortfolio, but on those services side, we identify one point of contact by which they will upload the content for assessment. It could be surveys for students that are using particular student services. And then the artifacts, right, are those peer review or reviewed or vetted resumes that students turn in. And so we're trying to have a one model approach. So whether you're on the faculty or staff side or student side, the look and feel of the ePortfolio is the same. And we're using it again to collect assessment evidence across the institution, faculty, from the faculty, from the classroom, and from the student affairs, from the services, is academic and student support services. And they're all using it the same way, whether it is a district, because we are a multi-campus institution. So we have a services department that's rolling out a district initiative. When they collect that evidence, everybody's rolling out that assessment the same way and collecting that evidence, and it comes back to our office. If they do what we call a signature activity at their campuses, same thing. It's rolled out. They roll it out their way. It's not required for them to roll it out the same across the district. It may be a single campus event. And then, but the criteria by which they collected evidence is all the same. And what they do is give us the link to the evidence. And I use that from the administrative side to showcase what's being done on the academic and student support services side, as well as on the faculty side, what's happening in their classroom from those faculty that roll it out in their classes.
Thank you so much. I took a lot of notes.
You're welcome. And we're presenting tomorrow. Dr. Ken and I are presenting about our connecting ePortfolio and assessment, and we're going to talk about all three of those levels. But you have my contact information from the conference. I'll be happy to share more about our processes.
It's amazing, Gracie. That's really amazing. So well done. And the whole idea of transparency across all stakeholders is super, super cool. So, colleagues, Kate's got one last question. Do you find that faculty who create an e-portfolio on this platform are more likely to assign e-portfolio work for their students? That's a great question, Kate. We haven't tracked that sort of information, but naturally, a lot of us who are engaging in ePortfolio would like to see ePortfolio for our students. Now, we don't have a formal institution-wide ePortfolio system at UNSW, but it's under discussion. So if you attend my lightning talk, Ignite talk tomorrow, you might get a bit more insight into that. It's a work in progress. But yes, naturally, if the educators are using Portfolio, they would love their students to use Portfolio.
Yes, I guess just to add that there is a strong push by a central working group on the student experience at UNSW to implement programmatic assessment across university, and ePortfolios would be an important component of that. So I think we're coming towards the last 5 minutes of our time. So I've popped a link to a feedback survey in the chat. It's only got 2 questions. So I will be grateful if you could respond to that survey, and that will help us to better understand the broad applicability of the My Education portfolio.
Thank you, Gary. Colleagues, thank you for your time and for listening. We've also got the further reading up on screen. So we produced an article in the ABLE ePortfolio review. So if you want to read a bit further, please head to that article and read through. And of course, we're always available to address any issues or chat further if you need. So Kim's asking if you could provide the link in the chat.
The further reading link.
Thank you so much, Gary and Patsy, for this. This really, I think these interesting concepts and ideas, which I think clearly were very generative, as people also making the connections back with what they're doing at their own institutions. But it's really fantastic to hear about the efforts you're making at UNSW, and it seems like the potential for scale as well as transferability to other institutional contexts and environments seems very rich for that. So we really appreciate you sharing, you being the vanguard of this work and also bringing this innovation to our colleagues here at ABLE. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks again to Gary and Patsy.